Let's face it, life wasn't always a walk in the park. But hey, I never complained. My folks weren't rich, but they weren't dirt poor either. They scraped by, gave me a good education, and instilled a strong work ethic in me. That work ethic landed me a decent job right out of college, accountant for a boring but stable insurance firm. 40 years flew by in a blur of spreadsheets, tax forms, and endless cups of lukewarm coffee. My life wasn't exciting, but it was predictable. Then, something completely unexpected happened. One dreary Monday morning, a new client walked into my life, Ms. Lewis. She wasn't your typical client. In her late 50s, she exuded a sharp wit and a no-nonsense attitude that commanded respect. Unlike the stuffy insurance executives I was used to, Ms. Lewis owned a chain of cozy cafes scattered across the city. Lewis and Bean, they were called, each one a haven of warm pastries and strong coffee. "All right, Sarah," Ms. Lewis said, her voice a brisk alto. "Let's get down to business. These receipts are a mess. I need someone who can cut through the clutter and tell me if I'm making any damn money." I smiled. Here was a woman who spoke my language. We spent the next few hours poring over receipts and invoices. By the end of the day, I wasn't just her accountant, I felt a flicker of admiration for this self-made woman who built a small empire from scratch. "You're good, Sarah," Ms. Lewis finally conceded, leaning back in her chair. "You see the forest for the trees, and that's a rare thing these days." "Thank you, Ms. Lewis," I replied, a sense of satisfaction warming my chest. It was the first time in years anyone had truly appreciated my work. That same week, Ms. Lewis announced a surprise, a weekend getaway for the entire staff. "Consider it a team-building exercise," she declared, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Besides, you lot look like you could all use a break from these four walls." The getaway was held at a charming cabin nestled deep in the woods. There were bonfires, board games, and enough laughter to scare away the squirrels. It was also there that I met Alex, Ms. Lewis' son. Unlike his mother, Alex was all laid-back charm and easy smiles. He rarely appeared at the cafes, preferring to spend his time traveling and exploring the world, as he put it. "So you're the accountant who keeps my mom sane," Alex said, sidling up to me at the bonfire one evening. He held a beer in one hand and a lopsided grin on his face. "Something like that," I replied, feeling a heat rise in my cheeks. Alex wasn't conventionally handsome, but his easygoing personality and adventurous spirit were undeniably attractive. That night, under a blanket of stars, we talked for hours. By the end of the weekend, we were practically inseparable. As we said our goodbyes at the office on Monday, Alex leaned in and whispered, "See you around, Sarah." His touch sent a shiver down my spine, and I knew, with a certainty that surprised even me, that this wasn't just a fleeting office romance. The next few months were a whirlwind. Alex and I were officially dating, sneaking stolen kisses in the stairwell and late-night texts that made my phone buzz with a secret thrill. But there was a dark cloud hanging over our happiness. Alex insisted on keeping things quiet, especially from his mother. "She'd freak," he'd mutter, brushing off my concerns. "She's got this whole image of me being a carefree bachelor, wouldn't understand." I didn't like it, this cloak and dagger business, but I was smitten. Love makes you do stupid things, and here I was, tiptoeing around like a teenager on a first date. Still, a niggling worry gnawed at me. What if someone found out? What if Ms. Lewis, with her sharp eyes and even sharper mind, caught on? Then, 6 months in, everything changed. I woke up one morning feeling different, a strange flutter in my stomach that wouldn't go away. A home pregnancy test confirmed my suspicions. I was pregnant. Excitement bubbled up in my chest, quickly followed by a cold dread. How would Alex react? That night, after work, I practically shoved the test into his hands. His face went white as a sheet. The carefree smile I loved so much was replaced by a grimace. This can't be happening," he stammered, his voice tight. "Alex," I began, my voice shaky with a mixture of hope and fear. "We can figure this out. We can." He cut me off, his voice harsh. "Look, Babe, he said, using a nickname that suddenly sounded cold and impersonal. This isn't the right time for me to be a dad. I'm not ready for all that. My heart sank. The warmth I felt moments ago turned to ice. But Alex. No buts, he snapped. This needs to be taken care of. You know what I mean? His callous words stung. This wasn't the Alex I thought I knew. Taken care of? I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. Yeah, he said, avoiding eye contact. There are clinics. It's no big deal these days. Anger flared within me, hot and bitter. No big deal? I shouted, finally snapping. This is my body, Alex. This is my life you're talking about, like it's nothing. He flinched at my outburst, but his jaw remained stubbornly set. Look, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'm not trying to be a jerk. But you gotta be realistic. You're not exactly a spring chicken anymore. What if something goes wrong? What if? He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. I was old, unfit, unworthy. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. And what about Ms. Lewis? He added, his voice dropping to a low murmur. If she finds out, I'm toast. You're toast. We're both toast. His words were a cruel slap in the face. It wasn't just about him anymore. He was threatening my job, my livelihood, all to protect his precious image as the carefree bachelor's son. The man I loved was turning out to be a selfish coward, and the realization shattered me. I spent the next few days in a daze. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. My work suffered, and Ms. Lewis, bless her perceptive heart, must have noticed. One afternoon, she called me into her office, her usually sharp eyes filled with concern. Sarah, she began, her voice gentle, but firm. What's going on? You look like you haven't slept in a week. Taking a deep breath, I blurted out the only truth I could manage. I'm pregnant, I whispered, the tears finally spilling over. And the father, he left me. My voice cracked, and a sob escaped my lips. Ms. Lewis pulled me into a surprisingly strong hug, her arms a warm haven in the storm of my emotions. Ms. Lewis' hug was a dam breaking open. Tears streamed down my face as I poured out my story, the betrayal, the fear, the overwhelming desire to keep the baby. However, I did not mention the name of the scoundrel. To my surprise, she didn't judge. Instead, a knowing sadness clouded her eyes. Men can be real jerks, Sarah, she said, her voice rough with emotion. My own husband walked out on me years ago, leaving me with a tiny Alex to raise on my own. It was tough, honey, tougher than you can imagine, but I did it. Her words were a balm to my wounded soul. Here was a strong, successful woman who had faced similar hardship and emerged victorious. It gave me a flicker of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, I could do this too. Look, Ms. Lewis continued, her voice firming up. This is your decision, Sarah. But if you choose to keep the baby, I'm with you all the way. We can figure out a way to make things work. Maybe some remote work, lighten your load a bit. Loyalty goes both ways, Sarah, and you've been a damn good accountant for me all these years. Relief washed over me, warm and welcome. The fear of losing my job, my livelihood, had been a constant weight on my chest. Now, Ms. Lewis was offering a lifeline, a chance to be a mother without sacrificing my career. The next few months were a blur of doctor's appointments, nesting instincts, and a growing sense of determination. Alex never called, never checked in. But with each passing day, the little life growing inside me filled that emptiness with something new, something precious, a love that was fierce and unconditional. Finally, the day arrived. A healthy baby boy, with chubby cheeks and a head full of dark hair, entered the world. Holding him in my arms, the tiny fingers wrapped around mine, I knew I'd made the right decision. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. My days were filled with the gurgle of baby laughter, the clatter of tiny fists on the high-chair tray, and the quiet hum of work emails answered between diaper changes and nap times. Ms. Lewis, bless her heart, even offered to help out with childcare sometimes, spoiling my son rotten with trips to the zoo and afternoons filled with her famous chocolate chip cookies. Then, one day, Ms. Lewis dropped a bombshell on me. "I'm thinking of shaking things up, Sarah," she announced, her eyes twinkling with a mischievous glint. "Those cafes have been good to me, but I'm hungry for a new challenge." She explained her plan, to ditch the cafes altogether and open a bakery. Not just any bakery, mind you, but a franchise of this hotshot bun company everyone was raving about. "It's a gamble, Sarah," Ms. Lewis admitted, "but I have a good feeling about it." As the accountant, the financial side of things fell to me. I crunched numbers, analyzed reports, and presented Ms. Lewis with a detailed business plan. The more I dug into it, the more excited I became. Of course, not everyone was on board. The day Ms. Lewis announced her plans to the office, the door practically slammed itself shut behind a fuming Alex. "You're crazy, Ma," he yelled, his voice echoing in the stunned silence. "Those cafes are a goldmine. Why would you throw it all away for some stupid bakery fad?" His outburst was both shocking and unwelcome. Alex completely ignored me, didn't even spare me a glance as he stormed past my desk. It stung, a prick of fresh hurt, but I quickly pushed it down. Ms. Lewis, however, remained unfazed by her son's tantrum. "Don't listen to him, Sarah," she said, her voice firm. "He wouldn't know a good business opportunity if it bit him in the... Well, you get the picture." Despite Alex's disapproval, Ms. Lewis was determined. With my help and a hefty loan, she sold the cafes and took the plunge into the world of artisanal bread and fancy pastries. The first year of the bakery was a nail-biter. Customers trickled in, but not enough to fill the cavernous space Ms. Lewis had leased. The dream of fresh-baked success seemed to be slowly turning stale. One particularly tense afternoon, I was presenting some financial reports to Ms. Lewis when Alex barged in, uninvited as usual. He glanced at me with a sneer, then turned to his mother. "See, Ma," he scoffed. "Told you this was a stupid idea. You're gonna lose your shirt, thanks to your lousy advisors." He flicked his gaze back to me, his voice dripping with disdain. "And you," he sneered, pointing a finger at me. "You should be fired for dragging her into this mess." Before I could retort, Ms. Lewis slammed her fist on the table, the force of it making the coffee cups jump. "Alex," she roared, her voice surprisingly strong. "You will show respect in my office. Sarah is a valued employee, and you will treat her as such." Alex, taken aback by his mother's sudden outburst, mumbled something about "just looking out for you," then slunk out of the office, leaving a trail of awkward silence in his wake. Ms. Lewis sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Don't mind him, Sarah. He can be a real jackass sometimes." I managed a weak smile. Alex's presence was always unpleasant, but witnessing his blatant disrespect towards his mother was a new low. 3 years later, that hard work paid off. Customers became regulars, raving about the sourdough bread and the decadent chocolate croissants. The bakery, once a struggling startup, was now a local institution, a bustling hub of deliciousness. Ms. Lewis and I celebrated the bakery's first $1 million year with celebratory cupcakes and an extra-large pot of coffee. The joy of success was bittersweet, however. Just a few days later, Alex strutted into the office, not alone this time. On his arm hung a young woman, all blonde hair and tight dresses, his new wife, as it turned out. They were there to discuss household matters with Ms. Lewis, their voices laced with a sense of entitlement. As they walked past my office on their way out, I couldn't help but overhear a snippet of their conversation. "She's being a stubborn old bat," Alex grumbled. "Refuses to give us any money. Maybe we should just..." His voice trailed off. The rest I could only piece together. It seemed they were hatching a plan that involved taking money from Ms. Lewis without her consent. My stomach clenched. I couldn't let this happen. I rushed into Ms. Lewis' office, spilling the details of the overheard conversation. Ms. Lewis listened intently, her face grim. "Alex," She began, a world of weariness in her voice. I knew he'd changed, but I never expected. But we didn't have time to do anything, because a shadow began to fall over Ms. Lewis' bright spirit. What started as occasional fatigue escalated into frequent bouts of illness. She'd brush it off, claiming it was just getting old, joking about how even her body was finally ready to scrap after all these years. I, of course, wouldn't have it. Don't be ridiculous, I'd retort. You've got more energy than most 20-year-olds I know. You just need to see a doctor. But Ms. Lewis, bless her stubborn heart, was determined to stay on her feet. The bakery was finally hitting its stride, generating its first real profits, and she didn't want to take her eye off the prize. There'll be time for doctors later, Sarah, she'd say, her voice a little raspy. Right now, we've got a bakery empire to build. Then came the day that turned my worry into full-blown dread. Ms. Lewis was presenting a new line of seasonal pastries to the staff when she suddenly doubled over, clutching her stomach. Panic surged through me as I rushed to her side. It's nothing, Sarah, she gasped, her voice weak. Just a wave of dizziness. Give me a minute. She reached into her purse, her hand trembling, and pulled out a small bottle of pills. Just need a little boost, she mumbled, offering me the bottle. I took it, eyeing the plain packaging with suspicion. No label, no expiry date, just a jumble of unfamiliar letters. What are these? I asked, my voice firm. Ms. Lewis winced. Alex got them for me, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Some new thing for energy and focus, he said. Strong stuff apparently. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a coincidence. This was an attack. Alex was somehow, someway, making his mother sick. The thought filled me with a rage so primal it scared even me. We need to get these tested, I declared, my voice hard. We need to know exactly what's in them. Ms. Lewis, shaken but resolute, nodded in agreement. Meet me at the office tomorrow, she rasped, her voice regaining some of its old strength. We'll figure this out, Sarah. We always do. Her words fueled my resolve. I wouldn't let her down. Leaving work early, I tucked the pill bottle into my purse and headed straight to the lab. There, I met with Emily, a brilliant chemist and one of my closest friends. Whisking her into a secluded corner, I filled her in on the entire situation. Emily listened intently, her brow furrowed in concern, and promised to expedite the analysis, and I left the lab with a churning stomach, the weight of the knowledge heavy on my shoulders. The next morning, even before I reached the office, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Emily, the subject line, Stark. Analysis results urgent. My heart pounded as I clicked it open, dread twisting in my gut. The email confirmed the worst. The pills contained a potent cocktail of substances, designed to mimic energy-boosting supplements, but with a sinister twist. Long-term use could lead to serious health problems, potentially even death. My stomach churned as I raced towards Ms. Lewis' office, the email with the test results burning a hole in my pocket. I needed to get to her, to lay out the horrifying truth about Alex and those pills. Just as I reached for the doorknob, my phone shrieked to life, the caller ID flashing my nanny's name. Sarah. Her voice crackled through the receiver, laced with panic. Something's come up. A family emergency, I gotta leave right away. Can you? The rest of her sentence was lost in the static, but the message was clear. I was on my own, juggling a brewing corporate scandal and a 3-year-old with nowhere to go. Frustration bubbled up, threatening to boil over. This was exactly the wrong time for a childcare crisis. Thinking fast, I called my son's daycare, only to be met with their voicemail message. Desperate, I dialed Ms. Lewis' number, hoping for a miracle. Sarah? What's wrong? Ms. Lewis' voice came through, laced with concern. I explained the situation, the jumble of childcare woes, and a burning need to discuss something urgent. A beat of silence followed, then a sigh. Bring him in, Sarah, Ms. Lewis said, her voice firm. We'll figure something out. Relief washed over me. With a grateful thank you, I bundled my son into the car, his bright chatter a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within me. As soon as I entered the office and sat my son down on a chair, the door flew open, revealing Alex in all his smug glory. On his arm hung his glamorous wife, her perfectly coiffed hair and designer dress a stark contrast to the chaos of my day. Their arrival was like a punch to the gut. But before I could react, Alex spotted my son, who was happily exploring a corner of the office. His face contorted in a sneer. "What the hell is this?" he bellowed, his voice dripping with venom. "Don't even try to pull this blackmail crap, Sarah. That kid means nothing to me." His words hung heavy in the air, a cruel and public declaration. Ms. Lewis, who had just entered the room, froze in the doorway, her eyes widening in shock. "Alex," she gasped, her voice tight. "What are you talking about?" Confusion warred with a dawning confidence in my head. Taking a deep breath, I met Ms. Lewis' bewildered gaze. "He's your grandson, Ms. Lewis," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Alex and we dated for a while. 6 months, to be exact. And then he left, when he found out I was pregnant." The revelation hung in the air, thick with tension. Alex's wife, the picture of perfect composure moments ago, let out a surprised gasp. "This is ridiculous," Alex blustered, his face reddening. "She's lying. This is all a..." But his tirade was cut short by his wife. Her voice, usually soft and breathy, now held a steely edge. "Alex," she said, her words clipped, "we need to deal with this. Now. Otherwise, the little surprise might have a claim on your inheritance." A strained silence filled the room after the bombshell dropped by Alex's wife. Then, to my surprise, Ms. Lewis let out a shaky laugh, a sound more like a cough racking her frail body. But she pushed through, her voice surprisingly strong as she addressed the stunned couple. "Hold your horses, you two," she rasped, her eyes flashing with defiance. "Inheritance? It's a little early for that, wouldn't you say? Besides, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon, not even if that's what you two vultures are hoping for." Her words hung heavy in the air, accusation dripping from each syllable. Then, with a dramatic flourish, she pulled out the email I had forwarded her earlier. "And thanks to Sarah here," Ms. Lewis continued, her voice gaining strength, "I know exactly what that little gift of yours is all about." She pointed a finger at the pill bottle. "Poison, that's what it is. You tried to poison me, Alex." The color drained from Alex's face, replaced by a sickly pallor. His wife, once the picture of composure, began to fidget nervously, her carefully painted nails digging into the flesh of her arm. The jig was up, their little scheme laid bare. "You're out," Ms. Lewis declared, her voice ringing with finality. "I'm changing my will. You get nothing. Not a dime, not a single brick from this bakery." Anger flashed across Alex's face, quickly morphing into a desperate plea. "But Ma," he whined, "give me another chance. I was just..." Just then, the office door swung open, revealing 2 uniformed police officers. Ms. Lewis had called them the moment her suspicions were confirmed. Alex and his wife, their facade of arrogance crumbling, started pointing fingers at each other. Alex blamed his wife, spewing accusations about it being her idea. She, in turn, shrieked about his manipulative ways and how he'd forced her into the scheme. We spent the next hour recounting the events for the police, the story spilling out in a jumble of emotions. Finally, with a promise to keep me updated on the investigation, the officers left. Exhausted but strangely exhilarated, I gathered my things, ready to head home. As I bundled my son into his car seat, Ms. Lewis placed a hand on my shoulder, her voice softer now. "Thank you, Sarah," she whispered, her eyes glistening. "For everything. You saved my life." My throat tightened. "We did it together, Ms. Lewis," I managed, my voice thick with emotion. The legal battles that followed were long and messy, but ultimately, justice prevailed. Alex and his wife were found guilty, receiving sentences that reflected the severity of their crime. Ms. Lewis, with a renewed zest for life, took her grandson under her wing, showering him with love and spoiling him rotten. As for me, she made a shocking, yet somehow fitting, decision. She was leaving the bakery to me, her loyal and courageous accountant. It was a legacy of trust and gratitude, a reward for standing by her side when she needed me most.